third meeting of the Regional EMS Council to order. Everyone please rise for the pledge of flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, if I can ask everyone just for a moment of silence for our departed friends, especially those individuals who were enshrined on both the New York State EMS Memorial and the National EMS Memorial during EMS Week earlier, just 2 weeks ago. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Secretary, do we have a quorum? We do. Awesome. Thank you.
Congratulations, everybody.
All right, thank you, everybody. First item of business is to approve the minutes from the prior meeting. That is the March 25th, 2019 minutes. Can I please have a motion?
I'll make that.
Second. Is there any corrections to the minutes or any discussion of the minutes? In that case, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the minutes are approved. Tonight we have excused Jim Vina. Dean Romano is his alternate and is here with us tonight. PJ Keeler is excused, Steve Retzloff's excused, and Jeff Williams is excused. So we're going to start with the executive director. Actually, Tim, can we do the audit first?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we have several guests with us here tonight. Peter Brody is here from the Bureau of EMS, and he's going to do a little bit of an update on some data with us. Dave is here from the Finance Director. And Stephanie Mumford, who is representing our auditors, Teal Becker and Shire Monte, is here tonight. Just a little while ago, she presented to the Executive Committee the audit for 2018. Now she is going to present the 2018 audit to Remsco, and it's our job to first ask any questions we have, and then after we're going to ask for approval and acceptance of the financial statements and the audit. Dave is here as well, having been the person that works on the books all year long. So let me turn it over to Stephanie to brief us on our 2018 financial statements.
Good evening. I just want to thank the council for having me here tonight to go over the financial statements, and thank you for the opportunity for performing your audit. So,
Can I just do it real quick
sure.
for everybody? There was at the door 2 letters. One is 2 letters from our auditors. If you don't already have it, you can go back and get it. One is their standard audit letter, and the other is the management letter.
correct.
And I believe Tim has a large box of financial statements. And if anybody wants their own personal copy of the financial statements, he'd be glad to provide it for you before that.
And then the other thing that was out there too was a 1-page form that says executive summary on it. So I put together a 1-page thing that will kind of go through quickly to go over the important things that I feel that the council needs to know regarding the audit. So the first thing I'd like to report is our opinion on the independent auditor's report that Teal Becker and Shimani has issued what we call an unqualified opinion on your financial statement. So what this means is that it's the highest level of obtainable during an audit, which means that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with GAAP. So without going through, I think in past years we've kind of walked through the financial statement and talked about some of the things in the statement and the footnote details. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm just going to go over some of these financial highlights that are in the executive summary. And if at any point in time you look at the full copy of the financial statement, if you have any additional questions or something that maybe I didn't cover tonight that you want to ask me about, Dave and Tim can certainly get your questions to me, and I can answer your questions at a later date if the need arises. So in the current year, some of the financial highlights is your current assets were $715,000 that satisfy your current liabilities of $18,000, which means you have a very strong statement of financial position. You have way more current assets than you have current obligations. So that puts the organization in a very strong financial position. So your total net assets at September 30th, 2018, which is the time period we reported on, was approximately $708,000. $441,000 of this was board designated, which is comprised of two things. It's part of it is the dedicated phone line that the organization has, and it's also the funds that were from the Spectrum frequency buyout, the money that was set aside for future expenditures. Total support and revenue for the organization for the year ended September 30th, 2018 was approximately $520,000, which was $66,000 less than the previous year. Part of what makes up this decrease in the revenue was the Narcan revenue decreased approximately $41,000, and the prior year included donations of around $11,000 that was to offset the mobile phone app and modem purchases that didn't recur in the current year. That was a one-time thing in the prior year. And then all other revenue streams that the organization had compared to previous years were fairly consistent and comparable with the revenue. Your total expenses for the year were approximately $590,000, which was $23,000 higher than the previous year. So that was made up of a couple of things that made up the bulk of that difference. Part of that was salary and fringe benefits increased $33,000. That was mostly due to an increase for Tim's salary, and then there was a new position for the assistant trainer coordinator that was added in the current year, which was the reason for the increase. Books and training materials also increased $900,000 as compared to the prior year for that line item, due to an increase in the prices for the same materials. Training supplies decreased $9,000 in the current year, as not as much supplies were needed. The prior year also had the expense side of that mobile phone app purchase of $6,000, an expense that did not repeat in the current year. And there was also a decrease in expenditures for the certificate of need. So all in all, the decrease in the revenues and the increase in expenses ended up with a $71,000 loss, or a decrease in net assets in the current year. Whereas in the prior year, there was a net income of $19,000. So between the 2 years, there was around a $90,000 swing in the bottom line, the net income for the year. Does anybody have any questions on those types of items, those financial items? Okay, so as far as the footnote disclosures that go with the financial statement, I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm not going to walk through what those are. There are no new footnotes or no new disclosures that were required in the current year, so obviously the information's been updated for the current year results. But I didn't feel a need to go through detail of what any of those footnotes are, but there's 3 things in there I did want to highlight that are upcoming changes that will affect your organization that are discussed briefly in the footnotes. So the first one, which would be effective for next year's audited financial statement, so your September 2019 financial statement, is ASU 2016-14, which has to do with the presentation of financial statements for not-for-profit entities. So what this new pronouncement will do is that currently in the nonprofit accounting world, you have 3 classes of net assets. You have unrestricted, temporarily restricted, and permanently restricted. So those 3 classes of net assets go away, and under the new standard, you only have 2 classes of net assets. You will have net assets with donor restrictions and net assets without donor restrictions. So currently, the type of revenue that you have, you will not have any net assets with donor restrictions unless something different were to change in your organization, you were to receive some different type of money. So it will just be some wording changes in the financial, but it really won't for the most part, that part won't really impact your financial statement. You will see a new footnote next year because part of this standard makes you disclose some liquidity of like cash and other current assets within your financials. So it's a new footnote we'll be talking about next year. Those are the main changes that we'll see that are upcoming next year. For the year ended September 2020 is a new accounting pronouncement, revenue from contracts with customers. So at this time, we haven't really dug deep within your organization to see what impact that it would have. But within this new accounting standard, they've changed timing of when an organization may or may not recognize revenue. So we'll have to look at the different grant agreements that you have, different types of revenue, to see if the timing of when we can pick something up in revenue versus if it's deferred on your balance sheet will change. So that's something that's coming down the road in a couple of years. And then the last one that is not effective until September of 2021 has to do with leases. So your main lease that this organization has is the lease of your office space. That's your biggest lease, which is currently disclosed in the financial statements with a chart that shows, all right, what your lease obligations are. Under this new standard, what will happen, it no longer becomes a footnote disclosure. They make you actually book that liability for the whole entire lease amount will be on your balance sheet as a liability. So there'll be a current portion and a long-term portion. So to offset that liability that will now be recorded on your balance sheet, you will also have a offsetting asset, which will be separately stated from your regular property and equipment line. You'll have they'll call it a right of use asset, which will essentially be the value of what that lease is to you. So what will happen is that asset will depreciate, and you'll see depreciation expense in your income statement. You won't see rent expense anymore. But that rent expense will approximate what your normal lease payments would be. And as you pay down the lease, it decreases the liability in your balance sheet. So at the end, your impact on your net income for the year and for budgeting purposes really probably won't be any different, but you will see some different things happening on your balance sheet when that pronouncement comes into effect. So those are just some things that we'll be talking about in the upcoming couple of years. So one of the handouts was it's a multi-page thing, the few papers that are stapled together. That is our annual report that we're required in an audit to give to the council, which is just required auditor communication. So there's nothing, obviously you can read through it, we won't go through it in detail. There's nothing to draw your attention to. It basically just outlines what our responsibility is as the auditor. It also details out that we were independent, that we had no disagreements with management, there was no material uncorrected misstatements within the financial statement, and so forth. So like I said, it's a standard letter without any deviations to anything. And then the last communication that you have is the one-page item on the Tealbecker and Shermani letterhead. That is our management letter. So we had one comment to report, which I believe was a repeat comment from last year, that essentially it just talks about how the accounts receivable and accounts payable are being accounted for within QuickBooks. So currently, some of those items are not being recorded on the full accrual basis of accounting on a ongoing basis. So what happens at the end of the year, working with Dave, we record as part of the audit the accounts payable and the accounts receivable for certain items. So there may be some differences with the audited numbers to internal reports that may have been presented throughout the year for those adjustments. They aren't overly material from year to year, but it's just something that we wanted to bring to your attention so that you could at least discuss and determine whether there was a cost benefit to recording these things on this full accrual basis of accounting throughout the year instead of just making a year-end audit type adjustment.
Do we have any questions for Stephanie? Okay.
Just, at least I heard it this way, back when she was talking about the books and training materials for the stenographic record, that was $9,000. I'm not sure we had it as $9,000.
And your question, I'm not sure what your question is.
No, I thought,
Yeah, I may have
heard,
been- did I
yeah,
misspeak?
you may have said like 900,000 or a much higher number.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is what I heard, and I just wanted to make sure that the record was correct. It was only 9,000.
Okay.
You heard correct, it was.
Got it.
Sorry.
Thank you.
A big difference. Well, I need someone who's listening.
That's right, we're paying attention.
A lot of books. A lot of books.
When we,
Yeah, those
when
CPR
we
cards
met
really went
earlier
up.
with Stephanie, we asked her if there's anything she wished to speak with the executive committee about without the presence of the staff, and she said that there was no need for that. And Stephanie also spoke very highly of the cooperation that she received from Dave and Tim and the staff in the audit process. So this is your chance to ask any questions about our financials for 2018 of Stephanie, as well as anything about it of Dave, since he's here with us tonight. He's not normally at every meeting. Okay. Being no additional questions, Stephanie did mention that one item in the management letter, and at the, earlier when we spoke, the executive committee members agreed that PJ, who's the treasurer, is not here tonight, that we would ask PJ and Tim and Dave to meet with Teal Becker and to come up with a resolution as to whether or not we should make the changes in the management letter. We asked Stephanie if those difference between the different accrual methods was significant, and she told us that it was not significant. It does not affect our overall numbers. It just affects a small amount of how they're reported in interim periods. So we're going to leave it to PJ to work with the staff team and the auditors to come up with the recommendation on whether we should put the energy into making those changes or continue as we are. So at this point, if there's no other questions, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the 2018 audit.
I'll make a motion.
And a second. Thank you. Is there any discussion of the 2018 audit?
Just for clarification, I think the motion should be that we're accepting the audit, not approving.
That's correct.
Fine with that.
Okay, fine with the motion maker. Excellent. Okay, if there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion is approved. Stephanie, thank you very much to you and to Teal Becker for working with us. Have a
Thank you
great
for
day.
having me.
Okay. All right, so moving back to the regular agenda order, our next presenter is Tim is going to give his executive director's report. And a lot happened this month. Okay, but Tim is not here, so we'll catch Tim in a few minutes. So the next up is the chair's report, a number of things to talk about. First, thank you to everybody here that came to the EMS Memorial last, I guess now it was 2 weeks ago at Empire State Plaza. There was excellent attendance from our region, and the governor did do a proclamation in honor of EMS Week, and a number of us got to go up to the into the Corning Tower where the proclamation was read, and I think we're trying to get a copy of that proclamation for the Remo office, but it was nice that the governor's office recognized the week. The lieutenant governor, as always, did a really elegant job of discussing what happened. And this year, all the 8 names that went up on the memorial were members of the fire department of the city of New York, or others that were responders at the ground zero on 9/11. And I think we're going to, as was said by a number of the speakers, nobody ever thought that the Tree of Life, that is the EMS Memorial, would be full. And it's almost full. And it's going to continue to grow because of the health consequences of 9/11, and I think they're actively now seeking to make it bigger, because I don't think there are many spots left, and there's a whole lot of responders from that day that are ill. So thank you, everyone, for supporting that. All right, let's go back. Tim, we were going to do the executive director's report. So.
Okay. Pretty long report, couple months here. Excuse me, I have a piece of pizza in my mouth. Highlighted a few things I think I'd like to discuss with you. Number one, Medical Standards Office. Our new staffer, Jessica Turek from LifeNet is in there. She's an RN, flight RN with LifeNet. Been on board now, God bless, give or take about a month or so. Things are working out well so far with her, and Deb has taken her under her wing. So we have somebody in that office 4 to 5 days a week now, which is good. And it's some lightened Deb's workload somewhat. Gave one of our presentations. I tell you, we kind of want to expand our Remo footprint in a different way and go out there, talk, or address various civic organizations. And we started off addressing the one of the Albany Rotary clubs. This happened to be in Delmar. Myself and Deb Cuffs went out a couple weeks ago and told the Rotarians who we are and what we do. And it was very well received. It went over great. They actually want us to come back We discussed Narcan training and some other things, and they have a very keen interest in that. So we're going to be doing a Rotarian Part 2 and Delmar in the near future. We also have a couple others we want to schedule now. One of them is the Schenectady County Rotary, and work on that. But it took me by some surprise. They were very interested to hear who we are and what we do out there. Gentleman in the blue shirt will be talking to you later. This is Peter Brody from the New York State Department of Health. We hosted a NEMSIS training program here, give or take, about a month or so ago. And Peter came in and brought everybody in that room up to speed, or tried to bring us up to speed, with NEMSIS version 3.4.0. And anybody that's on an e-platform or is probably familiar with NEMSIS now. We had 4, 5, 6 different program directors or reps here, including a gentleman, I believe, from the New York City area that came up to for the training. So that went well. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the Department of Health has redone, or is in the process of redoing, how program agencies and regional councils or Remscos budget and present their budgets and create their budgets. Dave and I, PJ, participated on a WebEx a little while back with one of the budgets. I think it was the council budget. And Michael Taylor from DOH is going to present another WebEx on the program agency budget. Same type of numbers on our end, presented in a different format on their end. But there's some things that they brought to our attention that myself and probably the other 17 program directors weren't aware of. That food, we can't pay for that out of grant money. That has to come out of general funds. Stuff like that they brought to our attention that we never really thought about and stuff. But other than that, other than some bookkeeping measures on our end and their end, I don't foresee any real changes there. Just want to let you know about that. I have a host of different events and meetings and stuff we attended. It's been a pretty busy last couple months there, but I won't get into that in the interest of brevity. But if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. And if not, this will conclude my report for the night.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the Executive Director? Okay. The Chair's report. I want to thank Tim and the staff for the program put on by the region during the MS Week. A lot of online presence from the region. Prizes given away to people that came in. JC was going to be here tonight, but he had a family emergency, and he was the architect of that program. So I think it's a new tradition for Remo to get a little bit involved in the MS Week activities, and so
JC actually had a complete rundown on everything that we gave away. We generated a tremendous amount of interest, especially on Facebook. Tons and tons of hits and shares on that. It was very successful, very well received. And every gift, award, or whatever we had was given away.
Maybe JC can take his report, put it into an email that you can send out to
Yep.
the council.
Yep.
But thank you for that. The next thing is to talk a little bit about determining a quorum. As everybody knows, we canceled our April meeting, which was a rescheduled date because we did not think we would have a quorum. It just, when you try and, I know we tried to reschedule a meeting, but when you try and reschedule and everyone else pulls out their calendars and realizes how complicated it is, you know, you all have this night on your calendar and it's hard to change it. So we did not think we would have a quorum, so we decided to not have the meeting. However, after that, Tim and I consulted with our attorney to talk about the quorum rules. And we have got something to announce about determining a quorum, and I'm going to try and say it very concisely so that it goes in the minutes concisely so we can all refer back to it in the future. So our attorney, Terry Hannigan, has told us that according to the rules that we need to follow, determining a quorum is not based on the total number of available seats on the Regional MS Council. Determining a quorum is based on the number of seats that we have people occupying. So Terry looked at our roster. Our roster has 23 names on it. So if our roster has 23 names on it, we have 23 members. So a quorum of a 23-member body would be 12, one more than the majority. So by that definition, perhaps we could have had the April meeting, but I felt it would be unfair to the council to suddenly change the rules without telling anybody, schedule a meeting, have it, and then tell everybody afterwards that we changed it. But we would like to go forward with Terry's advice, having our quorum be a majority of the number of members that are seated on the council. Further supporting that is an action that took place at the state, at the, was it the Remsco or the CMAC meeting? It was the, Peter, do you remember which one it was?
It was first.
Was it the first day or the second? Was it the first day or the second day, though?
Oh, yeah, because it's one of those lovely votes on Long Island.
No, it was the CMAC.
It was the CMAC,
Yeah.
okay.
It's always the doc.
It's always, okay. So during the CMAC meeting, we reached a point where it was uncertain as to whether or not how many votes would be needed to pass a motion. The meeting was temporarily adjourned, and the Department of Health, legal counsel, the chairperson, the parliamentarian, all the key players went in a room and came back with the ruling. The ruling is that DOH law trumps general construction law, and that for a motion to be passed, they did not need a majority number of votes of the full body. They needed a majority of the number of people that were present. So that's also a change in the way it's been done over the past several years. So it's consistent with what we had determined through our lawyer. So given those interpretations, we would like to move forward with a quorum being defined as a majority of the members of the council that are printed on the council, official council roster, and the number of votes needed to pass a motion be a majority of those members that are present, presuming you can only have a meeting if there's a quorum, with that new definition of quorum. So I wanted to lay that out for everybody. It's certainly open to any discussion. Being a determination by our legal counsel, I don't know that we need to do anything other than follow that determination. But certainly if any members of the council have any questions or concerns about it, we ought to talk about that tonight.
What does it say in our bylaws? Do we address that in our bylaws?
Terry, in reviewing our bylaws does not.
The rules
our-
trump the bylaws.
Our bylaws have
Correct.
a range in the number of members that are to be on the council. So the difference, so the council may be between, I believe it's between 15
And 30.
and 30 members.
Yes, sir.
So the bylaws don't establish, if the bylaws said the council shall be 30 members, it would be different, because that establishes that there are 30 seats. Because we are between 15 and 30, whatever we are at that point is what the council is.
Right, I just didn't know if we'd spelled it out that
We
it was
did
a
not.
majority of the.
Because we were looking at the county.
Filled seats.
So the quorum, so if we have 7 open seats currently, right? 8, okay.
8 according to my.
Okay, well, we had 7, now we have 8. So if we have 8 open seats, if those seats are filled and bring us up, the quorum number will change based on the number of seats we have. Any other questions on this, or comments, discussion? Okay, so that will hopefully help us in the future. The next thing I wanted to mention is that on October 28th, we would like to have a joint session between the Remsco and the REMAC, and it being an educational program. Dr. McHugh, who can't be here tonight, but who's the chair of the REMAC, and I met recently and talked about the opportunity for the REMAC and Remsco, which meet on different days, so we never, I mean, several of us go to both meetings, but essentially the two bodies never cross, to have a joint meeting and to make it a discussion of innovation and reform in emergency medical services. So October 28th is a Monday, it's the day of our regular Remsco meeting. Late that afternoon, we are going to invite the Remsco and the REMAC to come together for a meeting where we'll bring in some outside speakers to talk about things that are happening in EMS that are innovative, that are policy changes, that are changing how we operate, for a joint discussion. And so it's designed to be an educational session where the physicians and the management team and leaders come together. We will invite others, we'll invite all agencies to attend as well as the Remsco and REMAC members. So if you would mark your calendar for that. We haven't set an exact time, but I'm thinking probably it'll be late in the afternoon, with the hope that some of the REMAC members will be able to join us, and we're working on some speakers. The other program we're working on that I wanted to ask people to save the date for is the November 8th is going to be a Capital Region EMS Leadership Seminar. This discussion started here from Brian Wood and Scott Bowman that we really need to do some work in EMS education. And we had talked about whether we were going to do an EMS education, leadership education seminar here. And at the same time we started talking about that, some others outside of this body started talking about that. And this conversation's being led mostly by Doug Wildermuth. Doug, who does a lot of speaking from E5, speaks on a lot of programs, had suggested to us and to the North Country region that perhaps we have, rather Mountain Lakes region, Mountain Lakes region, that it would be great to have an EMS leadership seminar. I checked in with folks here, and folks here said, just because we want it to happen doesn't mean we have to do it all by ourselves. So Doug brought together a group that includes Tim, representing Remo, myself, Lee Burns, who is helping him out at E5, Travis Howe, who's the executive director of Mountain Lakes, Nash Alexander from our region is involved, and the Hudson Mohawk AHEC, Area Health Education Center. And they have been meeting to talk about a program that both Remo and Mountain Lakes will sponsor, and the purpose of that will be to do continuing medical education for the managers of EMS agencies, so it's not going to be 1 hour of respiratory, 1 hour of cardiology, 1 hour of whatever. It'll be management and leadership. They're beginning to develop a syllabus and potential speakers. We'll be sponsors of that. The location has not yet been determined, but I believe they're focusing on closer to us than to the North Country. So it's probably, for example, they're thinking about Adirondack Community College's Wilton campus as a possible site. We think this room is too small, even though it's a pretty big room. They're targeting about 100 people. There will probably be a fee, there'll be a fee associated with it. It'll be $100 or less. That may be defrayed by who the sponsors are that make contributions to it. So probably at the next meeting, we may start to have draft agendas for people to look at, but please mark the date, and we hope your agencies will want to send people to that. All right, let's see. And I do believe that we had talked about some Remo sponsorship for the leadership program, and so we would be contributing some financial sponsorship, and I believe we had talked about somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000. I guess that but we never put that money towards a specific program, so I would like to ask tonight for a motion for us to dedicate up to $3,000 to sponsorship of the Capital Region EMS Leadership Seminar. If someone would be willing to make that motion.
I'll make it.
Someone want a second?
I will.
Okay. So discussion, is that a good idea, not a good idea?
Yeah, do you have an idea as to how you use it specifically?
Yes, the program is going to have costs. There is a desire to bring in at least one nationally known speaker. That's how we fly them in. So we're going to use some local people, but someone for that cost of that. There'll be the cost of renting the space to have it if it's not free space. There'll be the cost of meals, so we'll be providing breakfast, lunch, whatever, any speaker expenses. And so that'll add up to what it costs. And so if the Remscos that are involved, the program agency involved, put some money in, that'll come off the top, and that's how we'll determine what it will cost. I think the consensus of folks has been that less than $100, no more than $100 a person would be a good range to be in, since other programs like this have been in that neighborhood. So the money would go to basically lower the cost to people participating. Any other discussion? All right, so being no other discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Okay, so that's been approved. All right, so that is the end of my report, and we go into operational reports. Yes, Nick?
Can I interrupt you, Jenna, for
You
1
sure
minute?
can.
If you notice under new business, I had, as you know, we're making an effort once a month or so to introduce the council to a staffer here at Remo, so he can associate a face with a name. J.C. Guzman, one of our CIC's instructors, was on the slate for tonight. He had a family emergency, couldn't make it. But we have our finance coordinator, Dave Kowalski, here. I'd just like to introduce Dave Kowalski to the council tonight. Dave has been the Remo bookkeeper for 27 years now? 27 years now. And he will entertain any questions you have for him. And if not, he's going home to have dinner.
Will you take us with you?
Absolutely, as long as you cook.
I'm willing.
So
Okay.
Dave, this is the council. Council, this is Dave Kowalski.
Dave, you just bought pizza, so you should stay and have some.
All right, well, Dave, thank you for joining us tonight. Any questions for Dave? All right, yes, you're on the road.
Thanks, Thank you.
Okay.
Get you tomorrow.
Take care.
So we have, before we go into operational reports, so we have a guest tonight, and we had told him we would get to him by about 6:45, and when Tim told me that, I kind of snickered, and it was like, okay, yeah, really? But it turns out that if we do deviate a little bit from the schedule, we can actually get to you a few minutes early. So since Peter has got other places to be other than this tonight, if no one minds deviating from the schedule, I'd like to introduce Peter Brody. Peter works for the Bureau of Emergency Medical Services, and in the Bureau, he is the data analyst, specialist, expert, etc. So Peter understands NEMSIS 3, and he spent an entire day explaining NEMSIS 3 to those people that came up here for that seminar. We have asked Peter to explain NEMSIS 3 to us in 15 or 20 minutes. So I guess this is NEMSIS for people with short attention spans. And so we'll see if you can keep us with them. But a lot of changes in why data is being collected, who it's being collected. If you're using an EPCR, you know that today finishing your EPCR is an exercise in trying to lock it and having it tell you to go back, find what you missed, fix it, then it tells you what else you missed. So Peter can tell us a little bit about why we're doing this, because it's important, and what we're doing. So thank you for coming. And Peter is the captain of Duanesburg Volunteer Ambulance Corps, which I believe won the regional EMS work last year, right? Or 2 years ago.
We were Schenectady County's Agency of the Year 2 years ago.
But you won, I believe you won.
I was the leader.
agency-
I got the regional leadership award
So
3 years ago.
Regional Leadership Award a couple years ago.
4 years ago.
So Peter, please go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To summarize NEMSIS 3.4.0 down to 20 minutes or less is a bit of a challenge. We spent 8 hours here with representatives from Hudson Valley, Westchester, New York City, Mountain Lakes, as well as the Hudson Mohawk Remscos. And we're going through how to use Report Writer, which is a key factor for what we do at the state with the data. A little bit of the history on NEMSIS data collection. New York State has been at NEMSIS 2.2.1 for multiple years now. The approach with NEMSIS 2.2.1 was your validation score will drop if you don't do all the pieces parts correctly. Okay, that was zero incentive to the care provider or to the agencies themselves to ensure that their average validation score was up there. So when we were developing 3.4.0, not only did we go toe-to-toe with the NEMSIS TAC, the Technical Advisory Center contracted by NHTSA, We also have gone toe-to-toe with 21 software vendors operating in New York State, some of who will probably think I'm a little satanic and come from a very warm place with horns on my head. However, the data we're collecting is significantly improved between NEMSIS 3 and NEMSIS 2. In NEMSIS 2, and I was talking about naloxone because I was hired on an opioid grant. In NEMSIS 2, we would have providers across the state, not singling out any particular region, including this one, who would document that they gave naloxone. That's very nice. How much did you give? Where did you give it? What was the effect? What time did you give it? What was the volume of the drug? Did you give it up the nose? Did you shoot them in the arm with it? Oh, I gave naloxone. Well, thank you. That's an excellent assessment of that. However, that doesn't really tell us anything. So, over 65% of the providers across the state were not comprehensively documenting medications administered or procedures performed in the care that they were providing. Some of that falls back on the agencies for failure to have adequate QI rules in turn, or QI reviews to help correct inefficient or ineffective documentation. Some of that falls on the providers for not putting the initiative forward to understand that the medical record is a legal document. And some of that falls on the system for not beating the drum a little harder than what we should have. All that aside, the move to NEMSIS 3.4 has been approximately a 1.5-year project. However, it started in the Bureau approximately 1.5 to 2 years before I arrived with the preparation of the New York State Supplemental Data Dictionary to the NEMSIS Data Dictionary, and basically outlined New York State's rules. Over the course of designing the validation rules to make the data dictionary work, we've implemented some rules that require some of those pieces that were missing. If you give a medication, you have to tell us the volume, the route, the time, and the after effect. Did your patient's condition improve? And that is driving some people absolutely bananas, but in about 5 months, most of them won't know the difference and just say, yes, I know, I have to do this and this and this, and it improves. The question that is driving a majority of people bananas right now is where on some of their software programs do they find that they have to document that a female patient between the ages of 11 years and 55 years, whether or not that individual is pregnant. Myself included in the software program that I document on out in Duanesburg, and it took 2 calls to their support desk for them to tell me where the hell the field was hidden, and it took some of my members a little longer. Another thing we did is, with 3.4, they'd implemented the NEMSIS TAC had authorized more not values, not applicable, not recorded, not reporting, being the 3 top ones. And we, in New York State, limited the utilization of some of those and prefer to rely more on what are known as pertinent negatives. So you have an unresponsive patient whose date of birth is not tattooed on their forehead and you really want to know what the date of birth is. There is a way around that. You can apply the pertinent negative. Your documentation demonstrates that the patient was unresponsive. You can say, I don't have, there's a pertinent negative that allows you to unable to obtain. Or there are a couple different ones in there, just as an example. So earlier this year, we released some of that. Over the course of the last 6 months, we have been working on our schematron update. Those of you who don't know, schematron is how the data is expected to be formatted and applies the rules associated with the data values established throughout NEMSIS 3.4. There were some variances determined between upstate and downstate expectations in their protocols that required a last-minute shuffling of 8 rules, which became 16 because we had to set up 2 different sets of them. But a majority of those rules fell in around and along with data gaps or issues that we had encountered in the first schematron. So we're trying to fix things that by the end of 2019, we have an excellent system in place that adapts to the New York State expectations. That schematron update is scheduled to go live on Monday, July 1st at 10 o'clock a.m. in a rollout that starts across the state and across the software programs. The software vendors were notified 2.5 months ago that the change was coming. They were given the details about 4 weeks ago. They're getting an update by the end of the week with a recent revision we had to make for counties located in the the 5 boroughs. And our plan is still to go live with that on July 1st. The other announcement we made is that all New York State agencies documenting electronically need to have made the transition to NEMSIS 3.4.0 by December 31st at 5 p.m. So we've announced it, we let the software vendors know what the requirement is, and we have reached out to almost every EMS agency in the state that's documenting electronically with a copy to them and to their software vendor, which worked out really well to kick them into gear, as well as to the region. And poor Jess's inbox exploded. Poor young lady is new to the job, and James, who's the EMS data aide in the Bureau, send out approximately 450 emails over the course of 2 weeks. So much so that software vendors called and said, what did we do wrong? So you haven't done anything wrong, we just don't know what you're doing. So you need to make the plans now. So they have to test with us in order to go live. We have made the transition with EMS charts, with MEDS, which is AMR. We've made the transition with a couple other smaller software vendors who may have anywhere from 3 to 5 customers in the state. iCloud, which covers a fair portion of Mountain Lakes. And we are testing, starting tomorrow, with ESO, which covers a significant component of Greene County, as well as a decent population on Long Island. And we have plans to test with Data in Motion, who is Empire or Troy Ambulance Services in-house software program. So they all have to test so that they're all done with testing by the end of the 3rd quarter, so that by the end of the 4th quarter we have all of our agencies live in NEMSIS 3.4. Now the question comes up is what do we do with the data? And through informational sessions that I've hosted across the state for both agency leadership as well as frontline EMTs, New York State takes that data and we look for syndromic concerns. Some of you might recall that Rockland County has had a recent growth of measles. We look for opioid overdoses and identifying those throughout and across the state, all 62 counties. And we also look for and analyze where traumas happen and where strokes and STEMIs. And at the last CMAC meeting, they narrowed down the list of state quality metrics, and we're looking to establish the reporting that goes along with those so that we can establish statewide quality levels or quality expectations for care providers across the state. In the Bureau of EMS, we have started expanding our capabilities. And for any of you who have any experience dealing with the lovely state bureaucracy that I work within, understand it is much easier to hire on a grant than it is to hire a state item. So I have a data aide who's full-time until the end of August. We have 2 data interns who will be working with us through the summer and the fall. This will be our 4th and 5th data intern since I started. And we also have 2 research scientists. Each one spends 1 day a week working inside the Bureau to see what we can do with the data and how we can make some more of the data forward-facing, and how we can demonstrate what EMS is contributing to the state of New York when it comes to both emergent care as well as interfacility cares in the state of New York. So that's part of what we're doing with it. NEMSIS 3.4 has, to summarize briefly and then finish within my 20 minutes, NEMSIS 3.4 has more data requirements, has more expectations, and has more closed call rules is what most software vendors are referring to them as, so that they can ensure a higher presentation of data that's collected. We already know that our providers, for the most part, are doing a fine job of providing high-quality patient care across the state of New York. And where they're not, we're aware of that. But this data can also be used as predictors for where we might be running into some issues. We can use this data to analyze shoot times and look at coverage areas and where calls are being handled and where they should be handled. The other piece that I wanted to mention that's not quite NEMSIS related, but will become more apparent to Tim and his staff and his colleagues in the other 17 regions across the state is all those paper PCRs that we've been sending for years to here, and Tim and his staff do a fine job shipping them off to a vendor in Queens. Those are actually being data entered and uploaded into our NEMSIS 2 service bridge. We started uploading data third quarter of last year. We just finished 2017 for a second run with that for finishing any late submitted charts. And then we're right now uploading 2018 data to the state service bridge. That data will need to go to the state service bridge. It cannot go to the NEMSIS 3 site because we have too many rules on the NEMSIS 3 site. It would never pass, only because not all the fields are outlined on the version 5 PCR. So that data is uploaded and it is forthcoming, and Tim and his staff are going to be able to see where they're receiving charts from and where they can look to see who's not documenting and where they might have concerns on coverage or concerns or responses in those areas, so that the program agencies and the Remscos can actually have a better understanding of how care is being provided throughout the entire region. Are there any questions? Any daggers anybody wants to throw my way? I'm aware. And you're sitting behind me, Captain Massara.
As far as I can tell, you're just a messenger anyway, so.
No, actually, I'm the one leading the project.
So, I have a question. So the data that the state's collecting, is it feeding into a national database as well?
The data, the question is the data feeding into a national database?
Or, yes.
Some of it is, not all of it yet. When we started collecting data in the middle of the May 2018 CMAQ meeting, the NEMSIS TAC did not tell me that we needed to have their demographic files first in order for everything to make it from ImageTrend, who is our data repository, to the NEMSIS TAC. So without the demographic files, they haven't made it over. So in January, we're going to ask all the agencies to submit their demographic files so that we can send those first and then have all the back data make it over to the NEMSIS TAC. But yes, it will all be over there. Some of it's going now. Some AMR data may make it over there now, but they're a nationwide company, so things move a little differently for them.
Any other questions for Peter? Well, thank you for coming and explaining a little bit to us about this. I know that the arguments that we try and make to advance EMS profession are very difficult when we have no data to talk about what we do. And I think that a big focus right now in the Bureau of EMS is to try and take some of this data and make it into things that we can use or actionable. So Peter's a big part of that, so we appreciate your coming tonight.
Absolutely. One final thing. Yeah, and I know there's a company that I used to work for who's well represented on my left over here. So data, when I go out in the field and I speak to EMS agencies and leadership and Remscos and REMAX, and I enjoyed arguing with the regional medical director from Mid-State. It was actually kind of fun. He enjoyed grilling me for 45 minutes. And then came up at the end and congratulated me. But their data drives decisions, the 3 Ds for what we do. So if EMS wants to be more represented and more understood on the statewide level, the data is what will help drive us there. So there are significant efforts in the Bureau to bring on more agencies onto ePCR platforms. We had originally started with 2 service bridges, or 2 elite sites, one in the central region, which covered the central New York Remsco, the North Country Remsco, the Mid-State Remsco, and then there's one out west, which covers Big Lakes, Monroe, Livingston, Wyoming, Erie, and Southwestern. But there's also one that's opening up in Hudson Valley, that's managed in Port Jervis. There's also a small one that opened in the Westchester Remsco that services 9 agencies. Suffolk County is opening one managed through the fire service in the hopes that engaging the firefighters down there would be helpful with that. And the New York City Remsco opened one for a small number of their agencies, not the 911 system.
All right, anything else for Pete? Well, thank you, you did it in 20
Well, I think
minutes.
we've got, I think
Oh,
it opens us
Mike.
up nicely, so how do we open one?
You'd like to open a bridge? I can find out from Ben how you'd like to do that. I can put you in touch with Ben, understanding that I can't really be involved with the sale part of it after a month because of the RFP that's coming out to, the regular image trend update. But I can arrange with Ben, and if you'd like to do it as a collaborative with ARMS or Mountain Links, it might actually make it easier, and we can certainly set something up for that,
Okay.
if that's something you're interested in.
I think that would be fantastic. We've talked about this for a while, and it's something that, actually, Tim has reached out to Image Trend a couple of times. But we have not been successful at getting much response. So I would be really pleased if we could do that. Because the opportunity for us to look at all of our data at the same time, in the same way, would be
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you can put additional thoughts into how that's done, and then the other software vendors would submit through this regional site to get to the state. So, Tim, Dean Rice has left Image Trend for another opportunity, and he's been replaced by a gentleman named Ben. I can work to introduce Ben to him and to you, and then perhaps we can talk about the best way to engage with ARMS.
Sure.
They involve their regional chair. Anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So I would like to ask again if we can go out of order. Lynn just told me she has to leave in about 20 minutes, and the membership committee met today. So if everyone would allow us to go directly to the membership committee report, and then we'll get back to the regular agenda so Lynn can scoot out at the appointed time. So Lynn, membership committee.
Okay. So, the membership committee met. We have agreed that we need to put together a packet for all members, in particular new members, and in this packet would be bylaws, a member directory with phone and email contact information, an application to the council, or in lieu thereof, a resume or a cover letter, and a committee list with brief descriptions. Is there anything else from the members here that think it should be included in this membership packet? We hope to have this put together in time for the June meeting. So we're looking for your input. Is there anything else you can think of that you'd like to see included? Don't all talk at once.
I think it's a good list.
Okay, well, if you think of
It could always
something-
grow over time if someone comes up with something. We shouldn't put, perfect to the enemy of the good, so thank you.
Okay. We talked about setting up a process where we would review new applications or reappointment applications twice a year. In June and December. So the committee would meet in June and review who needs to be reappointed and then review the applications that come in. This hopefully would get the person into the groove for the September meeting. The other one is in December, because we typically don't meet in December, and it would have them in place in time for January. Just throwing it out there. The applications, and I'm sorry, Jeff Williams isn't here this evening because of a family issue. He has a great deal of information to share on this, but briefly, he felt strongly, and we agree, that there be preference to sitting members. If they're in good standing, they get first dibs, kind of thing. That only if there is more than one application, if we've got bunches of people, pounding down our door wanting to come play, well, we could hope, Lester, that then the committee, which at least would have to have a quorum, would interview, and we would pass along a report to the council for their consideration. Also, I remind you that the new bylaws that was adopted recently says, new members may be seated by a majority vote at any regular meeting of the council. The membership committee, with approval of the council, shall determine the procedure for renewal of existing members and the approval of new applicants. So we're not trying to create more work, but we're trying to be fair. We actually split up the list of all of the Remscos across the state amongst the 5 of us. We each had a call sheet and we made calls. And we made calls and we made calls and calls, and you'd be surprised how far we didn't get. And the question was, do you have a policy or procedure for consideration of at-large members? One man snickered at one point and said, you know, first come, first serve kind of thing. Not a lot of people looking to do it. Several agencies said that they went strongly by their bylaws, which in 2 of these cases, it was if someone missed 3 consecutive meetings or 50% of the total number of meetings, that they were dropped from the council. We have that in place in our bylaws. The may, so that if there's extenuating circumstances, it's not arbitrary. There was, I can't speak for Jeff, because Jeff did reach a couple of people, but we weren't able to get his information. But it appears that we're kind of in an uncharted territory. So I've asked about the packets. I would ask, does everyone agree, at least in theory, that there should be a preference to the sitting members if they're in good standing, that they would sort of have first dibs on things? What do you all think about that? Yes, no, don't care?
I would say absolutely.
I
Okay,
see heads nodding up and down.
okay, okay. What do you think about a twice a year? We're looking to streamline the proposal, or the process, where we still keep track of, you know, whose term is coming up, that kind of thing. But it would give us more regularity to the situation and come back to this body.
I think we have more open seats now than we've ever had in
Yes,
my
sir.
memory.
Yes.
And so as much as it may be an aspiration for the future to have it regularly scheduled, I think we need to move forward in filling
Absolutely.
some of those seats. And I don't want to be hamstrung by,
That
it's
is the-
June and they're not
That is
filled
the
this
intent,
month.
we weren't gonna wait
But-
till December for the
Right,
seats that are
so
available now.
let's
No.
move, I mean, I do think it makes sense to have going forward a couple times a year, even though I think that the board should feel free to fill seats when it needs to fill seats. If we were to have some sort of, you know, mass departure, because, you know, a whole bunch of people moved out of town and once, the board can certainly change that, but I think it's a nice standard to have, you know, a couple times a year.
But this is like down the road.
Yeah.
We do what we gotta do now to
Right.
make it happen. Okay. Is there anything that I haven't mentioned, that recommendations? Could you all give us recommendations of things you'd like to see? Think would be a good idea?
I have 2 for you. One, and I think we've talked about some of these before, is being that we have a lot of open seats, I think that the committee should write a letter and ask the secretary to write to agencies within the region and notify them that there's a group of at-large seats and that we are seeking applicants from our agency membership. And that way, you know, I think one of the reasons we're going through this process is because the council did not feel comfortable going with first come, first serve, right?
Yes, sir.
So, right now, you know, the only way to find out if people within the region are willing is if the committee writes a letter, the secretary sends it out, or, and Tim then follows up and we get a list for you.
There was one thing I forgot to include, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I forgot to include, but Carol made a good point,
Yep.
is that we actually include the paragraph from Article 30 that specifies the list of all the different types of people.
And what the council about.
You know what I mean?
Sure, okay, yeah, I agree.
Because in our emails, you and I, we've
Right.
talked about different things.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it would show that they're,
Right, but, you know, obviously, we have a lot of spots to fill. The second suggestion is, over the last couple months, we've done a little, we've talked about having non-agency representatives, and I think that there are two really excellent things, the three excellent things that have happened. Number one is, both Scott and Tim have talked to people at county departments of health who might be interested in serving on the council, so having a representative from a county department of health. That brings us another perspective, and also means that our information will be getting into the county departments of health. The second one is that the Iroquois Healthcare Alliance, which is the hospital trade association in our region, would be potentially interested in having a member on the council. And again, that opens up another line of communication between hospitals and pre-hospital care. And the third one that Tim has been working on is finding a member of the business community to serve on the council. So with this many open seats, seeking a couple outside experts, like a member of the business community, a member of the public health community, and a member of the hospital community, would be an excellent way for us to bring some new outside talent here. There are only 3 people in a council of many, so it doesn't change the character, but it gives us more communication. So I think that would be an excellent thing for the committee to pursue in this one time, trying to fill some of those seats.
is there anything else from anyone else? Could you share it? Well, we hope to have a sample packet for you for our, if we're still having it, the June 24th meeting? 23rd?
24th.
24th?
Okay, any questions for Lynn's report? Okay, thank you very much, Lynn. Okay, so before Lynn goes, we have something for you, Lynn. We've been trying to give this to you for a couple months, but schedules have not been perfect. And so you served as secretary at the Remsco for a number of years. So on behalf of all of us, we wanted to present you this and thank you for your years as secretary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
We have, and if you want the box, we've got it right here. Okay, so academic committee and, no, I'm sorry, medical director's report, academic committee and REMAP. All rolled into one maybe, because Dr. McHugh is not here.
We meet Wednesday, no report.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Okay, treasurer, PJ is not here tonight, but the April financials have been distributed to everybody. You'll notice that there's a new format. PJ asked me to let everybody know that he's been working with Dave on improving the format to make it more understandable. His email to me today was, we're getting close, and there's still a few little tweaks. One thing you'll notice that's new on the bottom of the balance sheet tonight is a note that future payments from New York State will become receivables in this year. Because of the way we do our accounting, it doesn't show how much money is coming in on our grant during the whole year. And so if you look at our balance sheet today, you'd see that we had $654,000 in assets last year at this time, compared to $591,000 this year. That would show, holy heck, where did all our money go? That's because the balance sheet does not show that income that is predicted to come in based on the state grant. So that's going to be added as a note. And I think we already went over at previous meetings how we're accounting for the training budget separately and how it feeds into the operating budget. So any questions on the financial report that we can relay to PJ, or you can certainly contact PJ on your own. Okay, QI, I guess we have no report, right, Tim, because the meeting is this week?
They meet this week as well.
And Tim did distribute by email the minutes from the last QI meeting. He also distributed the highlights of 2018 remote training by email, and I think he put copies out tonight. I'm going to suggest, Tim, for the next newsletter, you incorporate a lot of that 2018 highlights, because a lot of good stuff happened there. Okay. Information sharing. DOH disciplinary actions. We have one, Jose Rivera, Bronx, New York, had his certification revoked for violations of Part 800. We have no course applications. We have no correspondence. Committee reports. First one up is the executive committee. We have nothing to report other than the executive committee. Well, I guess we do have something to report. The executive committee did take 2 actions that will be covered later tonight. Because of the canceling of the last meeting, the executive committee did approve the bond purchase on April 19th and changing our investment in the portfolio. It was approved by unanimous vote. And on April 17th, the executive committee approved the regional EMS awards so that they could be forwarded to the state in time to the deadline, since the deadline was prior to tonight's meeting. So that's all from the executive committee. Now to the finance committee. I get to report on that. We purchased $65,000 in bonds in April. That comes out of a long discussion and review with our counsel, Jim Watkinson from RBC, that we were holding $99,000 in cash in a money market account with RBC that earned virtually no interest. So that money was just sitting as cash. So 29% of our portfolio was in cash. We invested $65,000 making a bond purchase that he had recommended to us. We have a bond sort of portfolio that the committee set up with him of what kind of bonds we're looking for. That leaves us now with $34,000 in cash sitting in our investment account. So 10% of our investment account is now cash instead of 29%. We also distributed by email, and I think Tim has copies tonight. We had talked about doing periodically a portfolio performance summary. The summaries that the committee gets are quite detailed, and no one, rather than make you read that, this is a very quick summary, and it was distributed by email, and I think there are copies tonight. Essentially, we have about 3/4 of our money is in fixed income, so that's bonds. We have a very small amount, about 5% or 6% that are in stocks, and then the remainder is in cash. So we stick with bonds. We do have a portfolio performance benchmarks that RBC uses with all of their clients. These benchmarks, it's the same benchmark for any client, so it's not that they pick a specific number for us to benchmark themselves. And there's a page-long description of how they set that benchmark, if anybody would ever want to understand that. But if you look at our portfolio over the last 5 years, from April 14 to April 19, our portfolio returned at 2.96%, with the benchmark being 2.61%. So our goal is to hold money for the long term, not for the short term. So we don't look at what bonds did today or what bonds are going to do tomorrow. We look at how we did over 5 years. We outperformed the benchmark for 3 years and 5 years with RBC. Are there any questions on the Finance Committee report or on our investments or on how we give you information on them? Okay. So later in the year, we'll have another report. I don't anticipate us making any investment changes anytime soon. We basically hold the bonds until, unless we come up with more retained earnings that we want to do more purchases, we'll let them, the portfolio will continue. We've also changed how we manage our portfolio. We no longer pay fees for the portfolio to be managed on a regular basis, where buy, sell. We now have a much smaller fee because we do a lot less moving around of money. So, okay. Next is the New York State EMS Council report. I guess, Dr. Daly, do you have anything from the CMAC to report? Boy, I threw him for a loop. He was typing.
Sorry, I was finishing up some of the work from before. No, I think the only important things that came up in CMAC were, first, the change in the language from hospitals to facilities to make sure to allow ET3 to take place, should there be an opportunity. And that went through without a problem, and the change in the language to allow alternate versions of drugs in the formulary. So those were the two most important pieces from this region's perspective, and they both went through without a problem.
Okay, thank you. Also, tangential to that, Mike mentioned ET3. Earlier this afternoon, we hosted a meeting that 9 or 10 agencies attended to talk about the ET3 program. There's definitely some challenges for us getting an application together here in the region because of the way the rules are structured. Do not favor regions with lots of small agencies. They favor regions where you have one countywide agency or one big commercial provider. That said, all the agencies agreed that even if we can't participate in ET3, the handwriting is on the wall that insurance companies, whether they be government payers or non-governmental payers, are very much interested in innovation, in getting people not transported to the hospital, and they're now willing to pay EMS providers to treat them in their homes and then release them, whether working with medical control or transport them to places other than the hospitals that are less expensive. So that's a new revenue stream for us. It looks like the direction that we're going. This group has committed to continuing meeting. It was self-selected. The people that were invited to the meeting were the people that replied they were interested when Tim sent out an email saying, "Are you interested?" We've already discovered a few people that might have attended had they known about it, even though they didn't reply to that first email. So when we figure out, we'll work with Tim to figure out how to give maybe we'll call this the payment reform group or whatever, and we'll make sure that all agencies get a chance to be part of this. It sounds to me like this is going to be an ongoing, active discussion that will be for the long term, and it may be a year or two before we actually get into maybe something different than ET3. Does anybody who's part of that group want to add anything that was here earlier today? Okay, cool. From the State EMS Council, there is Gene Taylor, who some of you know has been promoted to Deputy Chief for Education. The new instructor policies and the clearance process will be released in the next 4 to 8 weeks. The statewide BLS protocol has been approved by the Commissioner. It is live on the website. It does go into effect on August 1. It was repeated again that every agency needs to have their mutual aid plans approved by the Regional EMS Council. It's just a reminder, I do not believe this body has ever, in my time here, approved a agency's EMS mutual aid plans, but that is a plea coming from the state for all of us. All right, Nurses Committee's next.
No report. We meet on June 27th.
Okay. Can I ask the Nurses Committee to help us out with something? We're having this program that'll be a joint CMO, CMAC, REMAC, Remsco program on education and advancements and reforms. It was suggested, I think, by Dr. Daly that would be an excellent opportunity to ask the Nurses Committee for input on that. So perhaps if you can put that on the agenda, and maybe you and I can talk before then about it, and then we can get some input from the Nurses Committee. That would be awesome. Okay, the MCI Committee, PJ's not here, so I assume there's no report. We've already done membership. I think this is not the time of the year for the nominating committee, so Maria probably has no report.
I don't.
That takes us to Brian Wood, the awards committee.
You guys approved it already. Now, just wanted to say thanks for everybody that participated in grading those. We had some more good discussion before this started. We did have representation from all 6 counties on the nominate or the grading process for the awards. If you look down through the results of those, it was a good mix. So you knew people spent a lot of time reviewing the numerous nominations that there were. It takes a long time to review them, and BLS providers had 9 people, and it was hard because some people thought you just had to do like the top 3, but it was, I had to explain to them, you know, you put the top 3, and then, you know, somebody else does a different top 3. So we needed to grade them all. So that took the most. There was 9 people for BLS Provider of the Year, so trying to narrow them down and rank them 9 to 1 was a bit challenging. So some ideas, we may try to meet sooner rather than later to discuss a process for doing it next year. There was some discussion about maybe using a Survey Monkey tool to come up so that we can use, so that all the members on the council could vote, and it would be a good representation of the entire council. Just need to figure out how to do that. It may be a couple of links because there's more than 10 people, and it may require us to put the nominations, in a password protected or web hosted area so that you can go on and look at them and then rank them on a survey. We'll figure that out. I know Scott's a wizard with survey, and there's a couple other people that could probably help me through that process, but certainly we'll discuss that before we do anything for them. So that's it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Brian. That's
Brian.
He takes credit for everything you do anyway.
Yeah. All right, before we get to county reports, is everyone aware that Albany Med has released a new linen policy that will be going into effect shortly? Okay. Is anyone not aware? Okay.
I don't know about the ET3 meeting either, so that's all right.
Well, so I don't know if they've sent it out to the whole field. I know they released it at the EMS Education Day. There is a new policy that will be implemented, I believe, this month, and it is going to change what we do for our linen substitution. Instead of picking up a sheet, a pillowcase, and a blanket, now we'll be picking up a pre-packaged packet of a disposable fitted sheet for an ambulance stretcher, a top sheet and a disposable top sheet and a disposable pillowcase. And the bath blankets will still be available. So agencies, probably not an issue during the summertime, but during wintertime, there'll be, it won't be the bigger, heavy cotton blankets, it'll be the little bath blankets. And so just another reason why we're gonna have to, as ambulance providers, be more careful of what we have available on our ambulances for keeping people warm, because it'll be just a little change there. And I think there's a huge, I talked to our bro about this, he explained why this is happening. I don't think we're the culprits here. It's that just a huge, between the switch between the hospitals and what Albany Med gets credit for with their linen vendor, there's a huge financial loss to Albany Med, and so they've found a way to lower the cost, and so we're gonna get different linen.
I would suggest that if anybody begins to use the product, has any product failures, concerns about it, believes that in any way it's altering the appearance of Albany Med to the community, or their partnership with EMS, that they bring those comments to this forum, and this body then write letters to the CEO about the quality of the product. If there are concerns from the rank and file, EMS provider.
Thank you, Dr. Daly, for that.
Can
When
you
you
get
say
them pre-printed with the Albany Med logo on them?
Oh, you'll know, say disposable, do you mean like paper?
Yes.
That's not gonna hold up to the weather.
Maria asked if it will hold up to the weather. I'm not sure if they're water. I assume they're
They're
impervious.
paper?
So they've got to be some sort of treated product. That they were used. They handed them out in the EMS education. They're sort of
So it's not exactly paper.
Okay.
He's gonna get us here.
I'm sorry.
We're gonna do show and tell.
Not like the disposable gowns.
That's enough done.
Yeah, we're done.
Sorry,
Okay.
Carol, thank you.
All right, we're moving along. It's all right. So county reports. Albany County report. Oh, come on, we had a meeting. You got to say something.
That was the other bald guy that was there at that meeting.
You were there.
What? Yeah, oh, I thought you were talking about Dennis. He ran the meeting.
We have a lot of meetings, I forget what they're all about.
And a lot of bald guys. What did we discuss? You were there too. I don't even remember now. You didn't ask me to put this together.
In Albany County, we're beginning a assessment, we're asking agencies to participate, and the sheriff's leading this effort, to participate in a self-assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of our EMS system. That will help us for planning purposes going forward. How's that?
We haven't had a meeting in 2 months. You're talking about the long one, though. I thought you meant the one that.
No, we talked about it, we talked about it at the last one, too.
Yeah, had you been there.
Yeah, it's not a thing anymore.
Okay. All right, Columbia County, is there anyone with the reports since PJ's not here?
I'll tell you that we are, we're working on, working on the ET3 thing as well. I think Columbia County is the only county that has its own truly county-wide system with the ability for all the agencies to operate under a county-held license, and the call volume is not insignificant. I think we all see that as an opportunity over there. Paige Wolfberg and Worth is doing a webinar for the low price of $129 per site in a couple of weeks, and all the agencies in Columbia County are going to be coming together to sit and watch that and discuss it and see what their advice is. So.
Please keep us informed on that, that's great. Green County, Steve?
We had our EMS awards dinner on the 25th, thanks to Scott coming. There's probably about 100 people there. We are having an active shooter tabletop on the 26th of June that EMS was actually invited to by the Sheriff's Office, so that was no small miracle. And we started beta testing today for a mobile CAD, which will have like MDT functionality, GPS, things like that.
Thank you, Steve. And Rensselaer County?
No report.
Okay. Saratoga County?
No.
Kevin's not here. No
No.
report, okay. Schenectady County, Jim's not here.
No report.
No report. Okay. New business, we did the audit, we did our guests. We have a couple, we're getting close to the end here. We have some core sponsorship renewals for approval. Greene County EMS Council, County EMS, Mohawk, Saratoga County EMS. And Tim, all we need is a motion for approval, right?
Correct, I distributed those to everybody. I also reviewed the apps myself. I didn't find any glaring deficiencies, so they're just subject to Remsco approval.
Do we have a motion for approval?
So do we need to do them individually?
I don't know if you do, if you can make a mass
I believe we've done them in
motion.
vote before, because it's not a recorded vote, it's would you like to do them individually?
I think that's necessary.
No, I would,
The experts say it's not necessary.
yeah, unless someone has a question and we choose to vote individually,
Okay.
my motion is to approve all.
Okay, is there a second for that motion? Okay, is there any discussion or desire to break them apart? Okay, that, no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. The last business item here is the Remo sexual harassment policy. It was distributed by email. It was developed by our council. It complies with New York State law. It includes the mandatory report form that we must have. After it was distributed, we did get a small amount of feedback from the membership that Tim worked with Terry to make sure it was incorporated into the policy. It's before you tonight for final approval. This policy applies to this board of directors as well as to the staff and the instructors. It applies to the students in the classes. Tim is going to develop training. The board is required to take training between now and October on this. And in addition, Tim, once it's approved, if approved tonight, I think you should send this out to everybody that has any business with Remo. And, you know, all agencies, all board members, all REMAC, it applies to REMAC, all REMAC members, just simply letting people know this is now the adopted policy. That way everybody knows what the policy is. Tim is, you know, those forms are available should anyone ever wish to fill out a complaint. But that puts us in full compliance with the new state law. So can we have a motion to approve the new policy?
I'll make one.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Mike?
The only, I think the thing that would be most important would be do the training in the same form we're doing right now. Just so we can get through the training, have a cohesive action on that.
I already have it prepared. You can do it by email. I can send it to you. there's a little questionnaire in there because it has to be interactive somehow, some way. So I developed a little 5 or 6 question questionnaire with it. You can read the stuff online, answer the question, send it back to me, done deal.
And we're gonna have to do that training every single year. It's just, that's what the law requires. Okay, so any more discussion on this policy? And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Is there any other new business?
Just a question.
Yeah.
In the core sponsorship, is that ever a time-sensitive issue?
Well, if you look on the apps, technically, yes, all these apps we received, I think expire the end of June, become effective July 1st. So yes, that's why I wanted to get them done tonight as opposed to the end of the month also.
And just-
It's a 2-year, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it a 2-year term, correct? Yes, and they typically expire June 30th of that year.
I was gonna say, notwithstanding, the fact that these folks got them in and they're probably pretty good at getting them in an appropriate amount of time, because we're simply acknowledging a renewal request, are we outside of a statutory responsibility if we were to, as an example, empower Tim as executive director or the chair to simply, upon receipt and your determination that it's complete, to simply have you act and renew it?
Well, if you look at the last page, Steve is about to sign right there. It's all subject to Remsco approval.
Yes, the Remsco is required to vote on these.
So we actually have to
I
have a
have
vote
to check a
system.
box that says approval. After review by the Regional EMS Council, we've taken the following action.
Okay.
Approval is recommended without reservation or with contingencies or.
Yeah, I knew we had to do that if it was new, but I wasn't sure on the other one, so yeah.
So it kind of states we have to do it.
Okay.
Is there any other old business? Okay.
Sorry, Steve, there's just one thing that was under new business that I just thought this group should know, which is that you and I went and testified with Dr. Doynow as well before the Assembly Health Committee on the subject of rural health and rural EMS, and basically implored them to put forth additional funding to make sure our rural EMS systems could be supported for patient care. So,
Thank you for mentioning that. I think I could say that between the three of us, our testimony was quite aggressive in recommendations to the state legislature. If anyone's interested in seeing copies of mine, I have it here, and I'm sure Mike would share his. We didn't sugarcoat the difficulty that EMS is having, and that this is not time for playing around the edges, that real serious solutions are needed. So that's just hopefully the beginning of a dialogue with the state legislature, with us being part of that. Okay, so any items from the floor? I would just like to have one thing, is just on behalf of Remo, send our condolences to Mike McAvoy from Saratoga County. I think most of us know Mike. His brother passed away earlier last week, and so just note that. And then our next meeting is June 24th, 2019, and so it'll be 3 weeks from now. And we need a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion.
Second. All in favor? Aye. We covered a lot in 95 minutes. That's not bad. Thank you.